Get out of here. You don't belong in first class, girl." The words, spoken by the flight attendant Vanessa, were sharp as glass. They were followed by a crack that echoed through the first-class cabin like a gunshot. 10-year-old Jasmine Richardson's head snapped violently to the side as a wave of gasps rippled through the airplane. Her small hand flew to her cheek, her eyes wide with a shock that stole her breath. Above her stood Vanessa, hand still raised, her face a mask of rage. Crimson cranberry juice dripped down her pristine white uniform, staining it like sudden, shocking wounds. On the floor, an overturned plastic cup lay as a silent testament to the confrontation. Jasmine's lips trembled. A tear escaped, then another, streaming down her face as the cold reality of the moment crashed over her. A grown woman, a flight attendant, someone meant to keep her safe, had just struck her. The other passengers stared, a gallery of stunned faces. Some fumbled for their phones, others looked away, uncomfortable witnesses to a scene that should never unfold at 35,000 feet. But what Vanessa didn't know, what none of them knew, was that in precisely 5 minutes, her entire world was going to collapse. Because the little girl she had just slapped, her father wasn't just any concerned parent. He was a man who could dismantle Vanessa's career with a single phone call, and he was about to turn this one brutal moment into a reckoning that would shake an entire industry. To understand the weight of that single violent act, however, one must go back. What happened on Flight 447 wasn't just about a slap. It was the culmination of something much darker, a poison that had been seeping into the cabin's recycled air from the moment Jasmine stepped onto the plane. 2 hours earlier, Jasmine Richardson stood at Gate B-17 in Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, her small hand gripping the strap of her lavender backpack. She was 10 years old, and for the first time in her life, she was about to fly alone. Her name, Jasmine, was embroidered on her bag in purple thread, a gift from the very grandmother she was flying to visit in Chicago. Jasmine was a fourth-grade honor student who spent her free time lost in books about animals, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian. Her hair was styled in 2 puffy ponytails, decorated with bright pink bows that matched her favorite unicorn t-shirt. Over it, she wore a soft pink cardigan, and clutched tightly in her arms was Mr. Hopper's, a well-loved stuffed bunny who had been her constant companion since she was 3. Around her neck hung a bright yellow lanyard, the words "Unaccompanied Minor" printed in bold letters. She kept checking it, tracing the emergency contact information with her finger, her father's number, her grandmother's number, everything she might need. She was nervous, of course, but it was a nervous excitement. Her father, Marcus Richardson, had business in Chicago he couldn't postpone, but he refused to let her miss spring break with her grandmother. So, he had made a decision he believed was for her safety. He bought her a first-class ticket on Skyward Airlines Flight 447. It wasn't about spoiling her. It was about ensuring she received better service, more attention, and closer supervision on her first solo journey. He thought the extra money was an investment in her comfort and security. He had no idea how wrong he was. For a week, Jasmine had practiced being brave, standing before her bathroom mirror and whispering, "You're a big girl now. You can do this." Her father had rehearsed everything with her: how to speak to the flight attendants, how to use the call button, what to do in an emergency. She had memorized it all, wanting to make him proud. When the gate agent called for first-class boarding, Jasmine took a deep breath, squeezed Mr. Hopper's a little tighter, and walked down the jetway. Her heart pounded a drumbeat of anticipation and anxiety against her ribs. She was doing it. She was being brave. As she stepped onto the plane, she was greeted by a flight attendant standing at the entrance. The woman was in her mid-40s, with perfectly styled blonde hair swept into an elegant bun. Her uniform was immaculate, her makeup flawless. Her name tag read, "Vanessa, 20 years of service." Vanessa's face held a warm, practiced smile, but the moment her eyes landed on Jasmine, something shifted. The smile didn't vanish, but it froze, hardening at the edges. Her gaze traveled from Jasmine's face down to the unaccompanied minor lanyard over her backpack and back up again. "Ticket," Vanessa said. Her voice was flat. Not hello, not welcome aboard. The warmth she'd offered the passenger just moments before had evaporated completely. Jasmine held out her boarding pass with a shy smile. "Hi, ma'am. I'm Jasmine. I'm flying by myself to see my grandma." Vanessa took the ticket and stared at it, her eyebrows furrowing. She flipped it over as if searching for an error. Then she looked back at Jasmine, her expression dripping with skepticism. Seat 3A? First class? Yes, ma'am, Jasmine replied, her own smile faltering. My daddy bought it for me. Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. She muttered something under her breath. It sounded like, how things have changed, and scrutinized Jasmine's paperwork with the intensity of a border agent. Behind them, a line of other first-class passengers was beginning to form. Finally, Vanessa thrust the papers back at Jasmine. Not handed, but thrust. Seat 3A is down there, she said coldly. Window. No offer to help with her bag. No welcoming smile. Nothing. Jasmine made her way down the aisle, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She found her seat and struggled to lift her bag into the overhead bin. It was heavy, and she was small. Standing on her tiptoes, her arms straining, she tried to push it up. Vanessa walked right past without a glance. Then, the Hartford family boarded, a white couple with 2 children around Jasmine's age, and suddenly, Vanessa transformed. Welcome aboard! Her voice was bright and musical. Oh, let me help you with those bags. She effortlessly lifted their luggage into the compartments. Then she knelt down to the children with a beaming smile. And how are you two doing today? Excited for your trip? Can I get you some juice before we take off? The Hartford children giggled, and Vanessa promised to bring them some right away. Jasmine, still struggling in the row in front of them, finally managed to shove her backpack into the bin. She climbed into her seat by the window, breathing hard from the effort, and placed Mr. Hopper's on her lap. She didn't understand what had just happened, but she felt it, the coldness, the deliberate difference in treatment. As she buckled her seatbelt, voices drifted from the front of the cabin. In seats 1A and 1B, an elderly couple, George and Linda Patterson, were settling in. George leaned toward his wife, his voice carrying easily through the quiet cabin. I don't know why they let just anyone in first class these days. Standards have certainly dropped. Linda Patterson nodded, her gaze flickering back toward Jasmine. Times have changed, dear. Not always for the better. Jasmine heard them. Her cheeks grew hot with a shame she couldn't name. She hugged Mr. Hoppers tighter and sank lower in her seat. Across the aisle, Richard Brennan, a businessman in an expensive suit, glanced at her with open disdain. He muttered just loud enough for those nearby to hear, I see the diversity quotas have extended to the airlines. A few passengers chuckled softly. Jasmine's eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. She didn't know what diversity quotas meant, but she understood the cruelty in his tone. The only kind face she saw belonged to a woman in seat 4A, Patricia Hayes, who offered her a warm, encouraging smile. But she said nothing. She just smiled, then looked away. Jasmine turned to the window, clutching Mr. Hoppers to her chest, trying to focus on the excitement of seeing her grandmother. She tried to recall her father's words from that morning. You're going to do great, baby girl. Just be polite, and if you need anything, the flight attendants are there to help you. But as she sat there, feeling the weight of the cold stares and whispered judgments, one question kept circling in her young mind. Why do they seem so angry that I'm here? She couldn't know that what she was experiencing had a name, a prejudice that doesn't always scream, but often hides behind polite smiles and professional uniforms, one that quietly insists that certain spaces belong only to certain people. In the galley, Vanessa was preparing for takeoff with 2 other attendants, Jessica, a younger woman eager to please, and Robert, a veteran who had been flying nearly as long as Vanessa. Jessica glanced toward the cabin. That little girl is the unaccompanied minor, right? Shouldn't we check on her? Vanessa barely looked up from her tasks. She's fine. She's old enough to sit still. But protocol says we should, Jessica began. I said she's fine, Vanessa cut her off sharply. We have actual passengers to attend to. Robert nodded in silent agreement. Jessica bit her lip and said no more, too new to challenge a senior attendant. And so Jasmine sat alone, a little girl trying to be brave, unaware that the next 2 hours would change her life forever. What none of them knew was that her father, Marcus Richardson, wasn't just a concerned parent. He was one of the most powerful men in corporate America, and the very airline they were sitting on, he was one of its largest, albeit silent, shareholders. While Jasmine sat alone, her father stood in a glass-walled boardroom on the 45th floor of a Chicago skyscraper. At 38, Marcus Richardson was a striking figure in a custom-tailored suit that spoke of quiet power. His intelligent eyes scanned the faces of the executives seated around the conference table. "The quarterly projections are solid," Marcus said, his voice calm but authoritative. "But I want to see a 15% increase in our tech sector investments by Q3. Make it happen." "Yes, Mr. Richardson," they replied in unison. During a short break, Marcus pulled out his phone and smiled. A text from Jasmine had arrived an hour earlier, an airplane emoji followed by, "Boarding now, Daddy. I'm being so brave." Pride swelled in his chest as he typed back, "Be brave, baby girl. First class will take good care of you. Grandma's waiting." He had paid over $1,200 for that ticket, believing his daughter would be safer there, better cared for. He had absolutely no idea what was actually happening, 35,000 feet above the Earth. Back on Flight 447, the plane reached cruising altitude. Airline protocol required Vanessa to give Jasmine a brief orientation as an unaccompanied minor. Instead, she appeared at Jasmine's seat for no more than 15 seconds. "If you need something, press the button," she said in a flat, cold voice. "But try not to bother me." She turned and left before Jasmine could respond. Moments later, Vanessa's entire demeanor transformed as she approached the Hartford family. "How are we doing over here?" she cooed. "Would you like some cookies, coloring books?" She brought the children apple juice, her voice a melody of warmth and accommodation. Jasmine watched, her confusion deepening. When the drink cart came through, Vanessa chatted warmly with the white passengers. She stopped at George Patterson's seat with a familiar smile. "Mr. Patterson, your usual scotch? Wonderful to see you again, sir." She offered Richard Brennan a warm towel, but when she reached Jasmine's row, she made eye contact for a fleeting second, then deliberately looked away, pushing the cart right past her without stopping. Jasmine's hand had been half raised, her mouth open to speak. She lowered it, confused. 20 minutes passed. She grew increasingly thirsty. Finally, she worked up the courage to press the call button. She waited 10 long minutes, watching Vanessa laugh with the Hartford parents at the front of the cabin. When Vanessa finally appeared, the warmth was gone. "What?" she snapped. Jasmine flinched. "May I please have some apple juice?" she asked quietly. Vanessa's face hardened. "We only have a limited amount. It's for our regular passengers." "But my daddy said first class has everything," Jasmine murmured, her voice small. A cruel smirk touched Vanessa's lips. "Well, maybe your daddy should have flown with you. Try water." She walked away, leaving the little girl clutching Mr. Hopper's, stung and bewildered. Then, things got worse. The Hartford children unbuckled their seatbelts and began running up and down the aisle, playing tag. Vanessa emerged from the galley, not to scold them, but to laugh. "Oh, you two, such energy," she said, offering them a bag of cookies. Meanwhile, Jasmine had only shifted in her seat to get a better look out the window, adjusting Mr. Hopper's on her lap. "That child keeps moving around," George Patterson's voice cut through the cabin. "It's distracting." Before Jasmine understood what was happening, Vanessa was standing over her, her shadow falling across the seat. "You need to sit perfectly still," she commanded. "This isn't a playground." Jasmine froze, her eyes wide. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I was just looking out the window." "Sit. Still," Vanessa repeated, each word a sharp, cold command. Jasmine didn't move another muscle, her world shrinking to the size of her seat, the airplane window, and the terrifying woman in the crisp, white uniform. She sat bolted to her seat, a small, still figure in the cavernous luxury of first class. Her breath was a shallow thing in her chest. She clutched Mr. Hopper's, her stuffed bunny, with a force that would have bleached her knuckles bone white, were they visible. Behind her, the carefree laughter of the Hartford children echoed through the cabin, a sound apparently permitted, even encouraged. It was only she who had to be invisible, silent. Then, the refined clatter of the meal service began. First class on Skyward Airlines was a theater of culinary delight, and the flight attendant, Vanessa, was its star performer. She presented each meal with an elaborate flourish, describing the dishes with the hushed reverence of a sommelier. For the Hartford children, her voice was pure honey. "Here you go, sweethearts. I have chicken fingers and mac and cheese for you. And look, a special dessert with chocolate sauce. Doesn't that look yummy?" For the man in the seat opposite, George Patterson, she was the consummate professional. "Your prime rib, sir, cooked medium rare just the way you like it, served with roasted vegetables and garlic mashed potatoes. Bon appetit." For Richard Brennan, across the aisle, a touch of familiarity. "Pan-seared salmon with a lemon butter sauce. Mr. Brennan, I remembered it's your favorite. Each delivery was a performance, punctuated by a warm smile and a personal comment. Then Vanessa arrived at Jasmine's row. The warmth in her face vanished as if a switch had been flipped. The smile dissolved into a tight, indifferent line. Without a word, without even a glance at the 10-year-old girl, she slapped a plastic-wrapped tray onto the table. Jasmine looked down. It was a standard economy meal, a prepackaged sandwich, a small bag of chips, and an apple. It was nothing like the beautifully plated meals everyone else had received. She glanced at the Hartford children's steaming chicken fingers, then back at her own cold, cellophane-wrapped sandwich. Confusion warred with her instinct to stay silent. "Excuse me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. "I think this might be the wrong meal. The other kids got—" "You get what you get," Vanessa cut her off, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Be grateful." From across the aisle, Richard Brennan's voice boomed, loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "Probably used to food stamps anyway." A ripple of cruel, knowing laughter spread through the cabin. George Patterson chuckled into his prime rib. His wife, Linda, nodded sagely as if Brennan had just made a profound observation. Jasmine didn't know what food stamps were, but she understood the laughter. She felt the sting of its intent in the way people's eyes slid over her, then quickly away. It was meant to hurt, and it did. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes. She stared down at the wrapped sandwich, her appetite a shriveled knot in her stomach. She didn't eat. She just sat there, trying to make herself smaller, wishing she could disappear into the seat cushions. From her seat in row 4, a woman named Patricia Hayes finally spoke, her voice clear and firm. "That's completely inappropriate. She's a child." Several heads turned to glare at her. The laughter died, not from shame, but from annoyance that their sport had been interrupted. Patricia held their gaze for a moment, then looked away. She had made her token objection. She wouldn't push it further. Jasmine was alone again, humiliated and adrift in a sea of confusion. An hour crawled by. Jasmine's throat was dry, her lips parched. The untouched sandwich sat on her tray like an accusation. No drink had come with it. She pressed the call button. She waited. She watched Vanessa move through the cabin, refilling wine glasses, laughing with other passengers, her gaze gliding right past the illuminated light above Jasmine's head. Desperation gave her a sliver of courage. As Vanessa passed for the 5th time, Jasmine spoke. "Please, ma'am." Her voice was a thread of sound. "May I have some water?" Vanessa stopped, letting out an exaggerated sigh that dripped with contempt. She rolled her eyes as if Jasmine had asked her to part the sea. "Fine," she snapped. "Wait here." She returned minutes later with a small plastic cup, filled perilously to the brim with dark red liquid. Cranberry juice, not water. She didn't set it down gently. She placed it roughly on the very edge of the tray table, unstable and wobbly. The liquid sloshed, threatening to spill. Jasmine stared at the teetering cup. It wasn't water, but she was too intimidated, too worn down to protest. "Thank you," she whispered to Vanessa's retreating back. The cup was so full. Her hands were small and they trembled. Carefully, using both of them, she tried to steady it as she lifted it. And then it happened. The plane hit a small pocket of turbulence, a minor jolt common to any flight. It was enough. The cup tilted. Cranberry juice splashed forward, soaking her unicorn t-shirt and, fatefully, spraying directly onto Vanessa, who was leaning over to collect a tray from the seat in front. Dark red stains bloomed across her pristine white uniform. "I'm so sorry," Jasmine gasped, her voice choked with panic. "The plane moved. I didn't mean to. I'm so sorry." Vanessa spun around, her face a mask of incandescent rage. "You little brat," she hissed, her voice shaking. "Look what you did." "I didn't mean to," Jasmine sobbed, tears flooding her eyes. "It was an accident. The plane bumped." The slap was so fast, so utterly unexpected, there was no time to flinch. The crack of it echoed through the cabin, sharp and ugly. Jasmine's head snapped to the side, a blossom of fire exploding across her cheek. Mr. Hoppers tumbled from her lap. The overturned cup clattered to the floor. A shocked silence fell over the cabin, broken only by a single sound. A 10-year-old girl beginning to sob. It was a raw, terrified sound born of pain and betrayal. Vanessa stood over her, hands still half raised, breathing heavily. "That's what happens when you throw drinks at crew members," she spat, a red handprint already blooming on Jasmine's dark skin. "I didn't throw it," Jasmine wailed, pressing a hand to her burning face. "The plane bumped." But the passengers had already chosen their villain. George Patterson nodded with grim approval. Well, she shouldn't have thrown her drink. Children today have no discipline. Richard Brennan actually smiled. Finally, these people need to learn there are consequences. These people, a 10-year-old girl, struck by an adult, and they saw not a child, but these people. The Hartford parents pulled their children closer. "See," they whispered. "That's why you behave." Robert, the older flight attendant, stood by, a silent witness, giving Vanessa a slight, approving nod. Jessica, the youngest crew member, looked horrified but was frozen by fear. Only Patricia Hayes moved. She shot to her feet. "Oh my God," she cried, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "You just hit a child." "Stay out of it, lady," someone shot back. "The child needed to learn some respect." Patricia ignored them, kneeling beside Jasmine's seat as other passengers began pulling out their phones. Not all of them were cheering. Some were recording, their screens aimed at the crying girl and the furious flight attendant, documenting an act they knew was deeply wrong. "I want my daddy," Jasmine sobbed, the words tumbling out over and over. "Please, I want my daddy." "She assaulted a crew member," Vanessa declared, doubling down. "That's a federal offense. I could have her arrested when we land." Patricia found the emergency contact number on Jasmine's unaccompanied minor paperwork and dialed. 300 miles away in a Chicago boardroom, Marcus Richardson's phone vibrated. He ignored it. It vibrated again and again. Something made him excuse himself and answer. "Marcus Richardson." "Mr. Richardson? My name is Patricia Hayes. I'm on your daughter's flight." "Sir, a flight attendant just struck your daughter across the face." The world tilted on its axis. "What did you just say?" "She accidentally spilled juice during turbulence and the attendant slapped her, hard. There's a mark on her face." In the background, Marcus could hear it. The faint, unmistakable sound of his daughter crying. "Put my daughter on the phone, now." A moment later, a broken little voice came through. "Daddy?" "Baby girl, Daddy's here. I'm right here. Tell me what happened." Through hiccuping sobs, she told him. "The plane bumped and my juice spilled on the lady. And she hit me, Daddy. She hit me and everyone is saying I'm bad, but I didn't mean to." "Stop," Marcus said, his voice a blade of steel wrapped in velvet. "Listen to me. You are not bad. You did nothing wrong. Do you understand me? It was an accident. Adults do not hit children. Ever." He got Patricia back on the phone, and the full, ugly story came out. The discrimination, the food stamps comment, the slap, the passenger's defense of it. "How bad is the mark?" "You can see the outline of her fingers." Marcus hung up. The 20 executives in the room watched as the CEO they knew vanished, replaced by something far more primal, a father whose child had been harmed. His voice was deadly calm as he made his first call. "Sarah, clear my schedule. Get my legal team on a conference line now and get me the Skyward Airlines CEO's direct line." His second call was to his security chief. "James, full background on the crew of Skyward Flight 447. I want every complaint ever filed against the lead flight attendant. I want it in 30 minutes. His third, to his attorney. "Mike, my 10-year-old daughter was just assaulted on a plane. Federal charges. I want them destroyed." His fourth call was to a corporate number. "Connect me to your CEO." "Sir, I can't do that. Let me be very clear. You will connect me to your CEO in the next 60 seconds, or my next call is to the Wall Street Journal to explain how your airline condones the physical assault of a child. Your clock is ticking." He was put through to a mid-level manager who began to placate. "Sir, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding. Your employee struck my daughter in the face. There is video evidence. Get me someone with authority, or my lawyers and the FAA will be your next call." "Sir, we'll need to investigate." "Fine. Let me introduce myself. My name is Marcus Richardson. I am the CEO of Vanguard Equity Partners. We own 40% of Skyward Airlines voting shares. We control your board. Now, do I have your attention?" Dead silence. Then a frantic, "Mr. Richardson, please hold for our CEO, Elizabeth Chen." While Marcus was mobilizing an army on the ground, Vanessa was in the cockpit, spinning her own tale. "Captain, the unaccompanied minor became hysterical and threw her drink at me. I had to physically restrain her for the safety of the cabin." The captain walked into first class expecting chaos. He found a small girl with a bright red handprint on her cheek, clutching a stuffed bunny and crying softly. This wasn't a disruption. This was a victim. Patricia Hayes stood at once. "Captain, I saw the whole thing. The attendant struck her after an accidental spill. I have it on video." "So do I," came a voice from 2 rows back. The captain watched the footage on Patricia's phone. The jolt of turbulence. The spill. Jasmine's panicked apology. The slap. It was clear, undeniable assault. He knelt by Jasmine's seat. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "can you tell me what happened?" Through her tears, she repeated her story. He stood, his face like stone, and turned to Vanessa. "You are confined to the crew rest area for the remainder of this flight. Do not have contact with any other passenger." He then turned to Robert. "You witnessed this and did nothing. You're suspended, pending termination." Within minutes, the FAA had been notified. Chicago PD was dispatching officers to meet the plane at the gate. As Jessica, the young flight attendant, gently cleaned Jasmine's face, her hands shaking, the captain cut off George Patterson and Richard Brennan as they tried to give statements defending Vanessa. "Gentlemen," the captain's voice was ice, "anything you say may be used in criminal proceedings. I suggest you save it for the police." Their faces went pale. In his car, speeding toward the airport, Marcus's phone chimed. It was the report from his security chief, Vanessa Peterson, 20 years with Skyward, 127 passenger complaints, 31 involving racial discrimination, 8 involving physical aggression toward passengers. Every single one had been dismissed. This wasn't one woman's isolated act of cruelty. This was the catastrophic failure of an entire system, a system that was about to answer to him. Justice was coming, and it was flying faster than the plane. As he raced toward O'Hare, his phone vibrated with the security report. It was a dossier of casual cruelty compiled over 2 decades. Vanessa Peterson, 127 passenger complaints, 31 involving racial discrimination, 12 involving children, 8 involving physical aggression, and every single one dismissed. The knuckles of Marcus's hand turned bone white as he gripped his phone. This woman hadn't just been a flight attendant. She had been a predator, terrorizing black passengers, especially children, for 20 years. And Skyward Airlines had been her shield. His phone rang again. CEO Chen, offering placating updates. Marcus's voice was a shard of ice. "That woman is fired before her plane touches the ground," he said, the words clipped and precise. "And everyone in your company who read 127 complaints and did nothing, they're done too." He hung up and pulled up the flight tracker, his obsession a frantic prayer. Still 30 minutes out, 30 minutes until he could hold his daughter again. On the plane, descending through the clouds, Jasmine leaned toward Patricia and asked in a small voice, "Will my daddy be mad at me?" Patricia's smile was gentle, reassuring. "Honey, he's not mad at you. He's mad for you." Below them, an army was assembling. Chicago PD, a phalanx of corporate executives in dark suits, and a small army of lawyers. And among them, waiting, was one very dangerous father. The wheels of the aircraft kissed the tarmac. As the plane taxied toward the gate, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, for your safety, please remain in your seats. Law enforcement will be boarding the aircraft first." The cabin door opened. A wave of blue uniforms entered, followed by the grim-faced Skyward executives. And then Marcus Richardson stepped aboard. A silence fell over the cabin. He was tall, powerful, his suit impeccably tailored, his face a mask of stone. His eyes, however, were alive, scanning the rows with a laser focus that missed nothing. "Daddy," Jasmine's voice, small and cracked with relief, pierced the quiet. Marcus moved through the first-class cabin like a force of nature. Passengers who moments before had felt so entitled seemed to shrink, parting for him instinctively. He reached Jasmine's seat and knelt, his movements fluid and controlled. He gently cupped her face, his thumb tracing the faint, cruel outline of a handprint still visible on her brown skin. His jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped. "I'm here, baby girl," he whispered, his voice thick with a tenderness that belied the fury in his eyes. "Daddy's here now. You're safe." The dam of her composure broke. Jasmine collapsed against him, her body shaking with sobs. "Daddy, I was good," she cried. "I promise I was good. I didn't mean to spill the juice." Marcus pulled her into a careful, protective embrace. "I know," he murmured into her hair. "I know you were good. None of this was your fault." She sobbed into his shoulder as he held her, whispering reassurances only she could hear. From a few rows back, George Patterson muttered, "Finally. Maybe now we can get off this plane." Marcus's head snapped up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His eyes locked onto Patterson's with a look that could freeze fire. "If I were you," he said, his voice dangerously low, "I would not say another word." Patterson's mouth snapped shut. Marcus stood, lifting Jasmine effortlessly into his arms. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder as if to hide from the world. He looked at Patricia, his gaze softening for a moment. "Thank you," he said, the words imbued with a profound gratitude. "Thank you for protecting my daughter." "I only did what anyone should have done," she replied. "But you were the only one who did." His gaze swept over the other passengers, the ones who had defended the assault, his eyes lingering on them for a beat before he turned to the police. "I'm Marcus Richardson. This is my daughter Jasmine. I want to press full charges. Assault of a minor, child endangerment, everything the law allows." "Understood, sir," an officer replied, already making notes. Marcus then fixed his gaze on the skyward executives. "Where is she?" "She's been confined to the crew rest area, Mr. Richardson. I want to see her." "Sir, I don't think that's a good—" "That wasn't a request." They nodded nervously, their corporate authority utterly dissolved in his presence. At the gate, the aftermath unfolded with clinical precision. Police photographers documented Jasmine's injury from every angle, the faint handprint a damning piece of evidence. Her juice-stained clothes were carefully collected and bagged. Patricia gave a detailed, unwavering statement, which was corroborated by two other passengers who had finally found their courage. Multiple videos of the incident, captured from different angles in crystal-clear detail, were handed over. Then, they brought Vanessa out. She emerged from the crew rest area in handcuffs, her face a mask of indignant disbelief. "She assaulted me! Look at my uniform, it's ruined!" The arresting officer's voice was flat, devoid of sympathy. "Ma'am, you are being charged with the assault of a minor. You have the right to remain silent." The color drained from Vanessa's face, her indignation replaced by the pale dawn of terror. Robert, the flight attendant who had stood by, was questioned next. When asked why he didn't intervene, he stammered, I didn't think it was that serious." His own biases, naked and pathetic, were on full display. Marcus stood through it all, holding Jasmine, a silent, imposing witness. Then he turned to George Patterson. "You defended a woman who struck my child," he said, his voice a low growl. "A 10-year-old girl. I want you to remember that when you see your face on the news tonight." George blustered. "Now see here, you can't threaten me." "That wasn't a threat," Marcus corrected him, his eyes like chips of flint. "It's a promise. The world is about to see you defending child abuse. Good luck with that." He saw Richard Brennan trying to slip past and blocked his path. "I know who you are, Mr. Brennan. Your employer will receive a full copy of the video with your commentary by morning." Brennan went white as a sheet. The Hartford family, who had watched in silence, tried to leave quietly, but Patricia's voice rang out. "You said nothing. You watched a child get hurt and you did nothing." Finally, CEO Elizabeth Chen arrived, her face a mask of practiced distress. She approached Marcus, her apology already forming on her lips. "Not here," he cut her off. "Not in front of my daughter. Conference room. Now." Before leaving, Patricia gave Jasmine a gentle hug. "She's a special girl. You raised her right. This was not her fault." As Marcus carried his daughter through the terminal, she whispered, "Daddy, why were those people so mean? What did I do?" His heart fractured. How do you explain the unexplainable ugliness of racism to a 10-year-old? "Baby, you did nothing wrong," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Some people in this world are just cruel, and Daddy is going to make sure they can never hurt anyone else again. In a sterile airport conference room, the reckoning began. CEO Chen sat at the head of the table, flanked by her legal team, HR Director Kenneth Price, and other senior executives. Marcus entered, still holding Jasmine's hand. He sat her in the chair beside him, where she clutched her stuffed bunny, Mr. Hoppers. The faint red mark was still visible on her cheek under the harsh fluorescent lights. His strategy was deliberate. Make them look at her. Make them see the child, not an incident report. The videos played on a large screen, every excruciating angle of the assault, Jasmine's terrified face, Vanessa's snarling violence, the jeering, racist passengers. Then Marcus's own team presented their findings. Vanessa Peterson's complaint history, 20 years of ignored warnings, scrolling down the screen like an indictment. Marcus finally spoke, his voice controlled but lethal. Vanessa Peterson has been your employee for 20 years. In that time, she has accrued 127 complaints. 31 mentioned racial discrimination, 12 involved the mistreatment of children, 8 involved physical aggression, and every single one was dismissed. Today she assaulted my daughter. So my question is this: who let this happen? A heavy silence filled the room. Kenneth Price, the HR director, cleared his throat. Mr. Richardson, I understand you're upset, but you have to realize these sorts of complaints are often exaggerated. The control Marcus had maintained finally snapped. His voice didn't just rise, it detonated. Exaggerated? He roared, slamming his hand on the table. Look at my daughter's face. There is a handprint on her face. She is 10 years old. What part of that is exaggerated? Patricia Walsh, a regional manager, attempted damage control. In Vanessa's defense, passengers can be difficult. She's 10, Marcus cut her off. She spilled juice during turbulence. Is that your definition of difficult? We will, of course, discipline the employee involved, another VP offered weakly. Marcus let out a short, cold laugh. Discipline? She's already been arrested. She's going to prison. My question is, what happens to all of you, the ones who enabled her for 2 decades? CEO Chen finally spoke, her voice shaking slightly. Mr. Richardson is right. This is a systemic failure. We protected an employee over our passengers, over children. Marcus laid out his terms, not as a request, but as a verdict. Vanessa Peterson is fired. Robert Chen is fired for complicity. Patricia Walsh, you're fired for dismissing decades of complaints. Kenneth Price, you're fired for tolerating racism in your department. Thomas Bradford, he said, looking at the VP of Operations, you will resign, or I will force a board vote to have you removed. One of the lawyers started to protest about investigations and due process. I don't need your agreement, Marcus said, cutting through the noise. I control 40% of this company's voting shares. I can remove every single one of you. The video of my daughter being assaulted is going viral as we speak. The only question is whether the world sees Skyward Airlines taking immediate, decisive action, or if they see you protecting racists. The room went silent. One by one, they acquiesced. That evening, the video ignited a firestorm online. Within hours, #Justice for Jasmine was trending worldwide. Every major news network led with the story. Child assaulted in first class. Airline's pattern of racism exposed. In their hotel suite, Jasmine sat between her father and grandmother. Daddy, she asked, why did that lady hate me? She didn't even know me. Marcus explained in the simple, honest terms a child could understand, the poison of prejudice, of judging people by the color of their skin instead of the content of their character. Jasmine's response was a pearl of simple wisdom. That's stupid, she said. Mr. Hoppers doesn't care what color people are. His daughter was teaching a lesson in basic human decency that so many adults had refused to learn. The consequences were swift and public. The news showed the video on a loop, alongside Vanessa's mugshot and the faces of the passengers who had supported her. George Patterson, a retired banker, was asked to step down from the boards of several local charities. Richard Brennan was placed on immediate, indefinite leave from his consulting firm. The Hartford family, though their privacy was protected, faced a storm of public criticism for their silence. Skyward announced the immediate terminations and a complete overhaul of its policies. CEO Chen issued a public apology, addressed directly to Jasmine. The company's stock plummeted 15% in after-hours trading. As calls for a boycott grew, Other victims began to come forward, dozens of people sharing their own stories of abuse at the hands of Vanessa Peterson. The pattern was undeniable. 3 months later, Vanessa stood trial. Her defense, that she felt threatened by a 10-year-old girl, crumbled in the face of the overwhelming video evidence. The prosecution presented her 2-decade history of complaints, painting a clear picture of racial animus. Jasmine testified via a closed-circuit video feed, her voice calm and clear, her story unwavering. The verdict was guilty on all counts. The sentence, 2 years in prison. Robert, the other flight attendant, took a plea deal for failure to report child abuse and lost his aviation certifications forever. Skyward settled with the Richardson family for $18 million, which Marcus used to establish the Jasmine Richardson Child Safety and Equality Fund. The corporate accountability he had demanded was just as swift. The executives he named were gone, replaced by a new, diversity-focused leadership team. The FAA mandated new bias training across the industry, and Congress passed the Airline Passenger Protection Act. The voice of one 10-year-old girl had changed an entire industry. Jasmine began working with a child psychologist, processing the trauma. She gave a presentation at her school about standing up to injustice. She even did an interview on a children's news program, delivering a poised message about treating everyone with kindness. She was still a child, still anxious in crowds sometimes, but she was healing. She knew now that it wasn't her fault, and that her courage had made a difference. 6 months later, Marcus and Jasmine stood in a different airport, on their way to visit her grandmother. They were flying a different airline, one Jasmine had helped select based on its safety and equality ratings. They had first-class tickets. Marcus had asked if she'd prefer to fly economy, to be less conspicuous. Her reply was firm. "I shouldn't have to hide. First class is for everyone." At the check-in counter, the agent, a young black woman, saw the name on the ticket and her eyes widened. "You're Jasmine Richardson." Jasmine nodded shyly, holding her father's hand. "Because of you," the agent said, her voice filled with genuine warmth. "I got better training. We all did. You made it safer for all of us. Thank you." Jasmine's response was simple. "I just wanted people to be nice." Aboard the plane, they found their seats, 2A and 2B. As they settled in, another unaccompanied minor, a young black boy of about 8, walked nervously down the aisle. As he passed, Jasmine spoke up. "Hey," she said kindly. "Is this your first time flying alone? It's okay. The flight attendants are really nice on this plane. If you need anything, just press this button." She pointed to the call button above her seat. The boy's anxious face broke into a smile. "Thanks," he said, his confidence visibly boosted. Marcus watched his daughter, a girl who had survived a hateful trauma, now helping another child face his fears. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Jasmine looked out the window, Mr. Hopper's in her lap, a small, peaceful smile on her face. "Daddy," she said quietly, "I'm glad we didn't let that mean lady make me afraid to fly." Marcus smiled back. "I'm glad too, baby girl. You're braver than most adults I know." The flight attendant came by to take their drink orders. "Apple juice, please," Jasmine said politely. "Thank you." The attendant's response was warm and genuine, a world of difference from their last flight. Jasmine Richardson was 10 years old when she learned that hatred can exist anywhere, even in first class. She learned that some adults hurt children, and that the color of your skin can make some people treat you as less than human. But she also learned that truth has a voice, that justice is possible, and that the courage of one small person can be enough to change the world. She learned that she deserved to take up space, and that she never, ever had to shrink to make others feel comfortable.